I've been small for years, counted the till, kept the floors shining, wore my father's watch like armor, until two men broke it, and Gary Downey asked the question that emptied an entire city by sunrise. I've been small for years. That's the truth of working nights on the riverfront. You learn the trick of being useful without being seen. My hands pull espresso shots for men who tip loud and talk low. My apron smells like cinnamon and bleach. And my father's old watch ticks brave little seconds on my wrist like it can outrun the rent. The arcade gleams with glass and money, 3 floors of boutiques and gaming lounges where college kids burn through trust funds and businessmen pretend they're not laundering. Gary Downey is a rumor that passes through it in a good suit and Italian shoes that don't make sound on marble. You don't look at rumors. You look at floors and keep them shining. The arcade sprawls along the river like something out of a dream someone richer than me had. All LED lights and chrome fixtures and windows that turn the water into liquid gold at sunset. I work the espresso bar near the service hall, the one tucked behind the claw machines where the cameras have good angles and nobody expects trouble. During the day shift, the place hums with voices and slot machine bells. At night, when I close, it's just the hum of refrigerators and my shoes squeaking on tile I've already mopped twice. Gary Downey himself is a shadow I've learned to predict. I hear his footsteps, measured, deliberate, on the 3rd floor catwalk, and know to be elsewhere. I catch glimpses through the glass office walls. Dark hair slicked back, navy suits that fit like they were born on him, and a thin gold chain that catches light when he leans forward to sign something. He holds meetings with men who arrive in black cars and leave through exits I'm not supposed to notice. I wipe down tables after them, collect glasses that smell like whiskey older than me, empty ashtrays full of cigars I couldn't afford to smell. I don't ask questions. That's not my job. My job is to disappear. The only constant in this carefully ordered existence is the watch. My father's. A battered Seiko with a leather band gone soft from years of his sweat and mine. A scratch across the face from the night he dropped it reaching for my mother's hand in the hospital. He died 6 months after she did. Heart attack, the cardiologist said. But I knew better. You can die from grief when the bills don't let you rest. I wear it on my left wrist, wind it every night before I count the register, and let it remind me that some debts you pay with your whole life. I work the late shifts because they pay an extra $2 an hour, and because the riverfront at midnight feels neutral. Bright enough, watched enough, far enough from trouble. I chose this job specifically. Public, cameras, a place where violence doesn't fit the aesthetic. I've been here 11 months. Pulled 620 espresso shots last week, alone, memorized the regulars. Learn to smile without showing teeth because teeth make you memorable, and memorable gets you noticed. Noticed gets you hurt. Thursday night, the big digital clock over the main entrance flips to 11:47 as I finish wiping down the espresso machine. My lower back aches from being on my feet since 3 p.m., and my shoulders feel like someone tied knots in the muscles. October in the city means the temperature drops fast once the sun sets. And through the arcade's glass front, I watch mist rising off the river like something out of a ghost story. You heading out? I don't have a sister. I have a bus card with 2 more rides before I have to reload it, and an apartment 23 blocks inland where the rent's cheap because the heat doesn't work, and my neighbor plays the same Celine Dion album on repeat until 2 a.m. But I have a routine, and routine is safety. Lock the register. Wipe the counters. Check the bathrooms, set the alarm, walk 3 blocks to the Christopher Street station, ride the Q train to the end, walk 4 more blocks, lock the door behind me, sleep, repeat. Tonight, I'm counting the drawer for the 2nd time, bills sorted by denomination, coins rolled and stacked, when I hear the laughter. Not the good kind, the kind that has edges. 2 men round the corner from the service hallway, the one that leads to the back offices and the boutique that sells handbags worth more than my yearly salary. I've seen them before, maybe. Faces that blur together in the late-night crowd. One's tall with a shaved head and a leather jacket. The other's shorter, stocky, grinning like he just won something. They stop in front of my counter. "Still open?" the tall one asks. "Just closing?" I say, keeping my voice neutral, my hands moving. I slide the cash drawer closed, lock it. "Sorry." "Don't be sorry." He leans on the counter, and I smell cologne mixed with cigarette smoke. "We just need you to do us a favor." I don't look up. Keep wiping the counter in slow circles. I can't serve after closing. Health code, not asking for coffee. The shorter one moves around the side of the bar, and my pulse kicks into something faster. "Just open the register, quick and easy." My father's watch ticks against my wrist bone. Loud, frantic. "I can't do that," I say, and I hear how thin my voice has gotten. "It's locked. I don't have the key." "Yes, you do." The tall one reaches across the counter and taps my apron pocket where the key ring hangs. Right there. The shorter one is behind me now. I feel him there, blocking the only exit. My hands start shaking and I press them flat on the counter to hide it. "Please," I whisper. "I'll lose my job." "You'll lose more than that if you don't move." The tall one's smile evaporates. Gary Downey can't protect nobodies. "Open it." I reach for the key ring with fingers that feel like they belong to someone else. The key slides into the lock. The drawer pops open with a sound like a gunshot in the quiet. The tall one sweeps the bills into a bag he pulls from his jacket. Not all of them, just enough to hurt, enough to notice. Then his hand shoots out and grabs my wrist, yanks it across the counter. My father's watch face down on the stainless steel. "Nice watch," he says. "Vintage." "Please don't." He twists. The leather band snaps. The watch skitters across the counter and falls, and when I lunge to catch it, the shorter one grabs my shoulder and slams me back. The watch hits the tile. The crystal cracks. I hear it from where I'm standing, that tiny final sound of something breaking that can't be fixed. "Downey can't protect you," the tall one says again, leaning close enough that I can see the gold in his teeth. "Remember that." They leave through the service hall the way they came, and I stand there with my wrist burning and my father's broken watch on the floor, and tears I didn't give them permission to fall cutting clean lines through the flour dust on my cheeks. I don't move for a long time, can't. My body understands something my mind hasn't processed yet. This wasn't random. They knew my schedule, knew the cameras, knew to say Gary's name like a threat and a test at the same time. I bend down, pick up the watch. The leather band dangles like a broken promise. The face is spiderwebbed with cracks. I cradle it in both palms and let the tears come for real now, because there's no one left to see them. Except there is. Footsteps, measured, deliberate, coming from the third floor. I wipe my face with my sleeve, try to stand straight, but my ribs hurt from where the shorter one shoved me into the counter edge. I'm still holding the watch when I look up and see him. Gary Downey. He's halfway across the arcade floor, coming from the direction of the tailor's shop that stays open late for private appointments. Navy suit, top button undone, the gold chain catching the LED lights. His hair is slicked back but starting to come loose at the temples. He's looking at his phone, thumb scrolling, face unreadable. Then he glances up and stops. I watch his eyes track from my face to my hands to the broken watch cradled between them. Watch his expression shift from neutral to something I can't name, something sharp and cold and suddenly, terrifyingly focused. He crosses the distance between us in 6 strides, doesn't speak, doesn't ask if I'm okay, just stops in front of the espresso bar, close enough that I can smell cedar and smoke and expensive fabric softener, and reaches out with one hand. His fingers touch my chin. Gentle. The way you'd handle something fragile. He tilts my face up toward the light, and I realize with horror that he can see the tear tracks, see the redness in my eyes, see all the smallness I've spent 11 months hiding. His voice, when it comes, is soft. Too soft. The kind of soft that means someone's about to bleed. Who made you cry? The question hangs in the air between us like smoke. I should answer. Should explain about the men and the register and the watch. Should follow protocol, file a report, call the police, let the system handle it the way systems are supposed to. But Gary Downey isn't looking at me like I'm staff. He's looking at me like I'm a problem that needs solving, and problems in Gary Downey's world don't get solved by police reports. I've been small for years, invisible by design, safe by obscurity. Tonight, that ends. Because when a man with a city in his pocket asks who made you cry, one of two things happens. You disappear, or everyone who made you cry does. I'm about to find out which. I open my mouth to answer, but Gary's already moving. He doesn't wait for my explanation, doesn't ask permission. His hand shifts from my chin to my elbow, firm but careful, like he's guiding something breakable, and he steers me toward the glass elevator I've only ever watched from a distance. Mr. Downey, You should be sitting down. His voice is still that terrible soft. You're shaking. I am. I didn't notice until he said it, but my whole body is trembling like I'm cold, though the arcade keeps the temperature at a steady 72. He presses the button for the third floor with his free hand, and the elevator rises with a hum that feels too loud in the silence between us. Through the glass walls, I watch the arcade shrink below. The espresso bar where my father's watch is still lying on the counter. The slot machines blinking their patient patterns. The main entrance where I should be setting the alarm and leaving through the side door like I do every night. Instead, I'm rising toward the private offices I've only ever cleaned when they're empty. The third floor is different at night. During the day, it hums with phones and meetings and the sharp click of dress shoes on polished concrete. Now it's just track lighting and shadows, doors closed on either side of a narrow hallway. Gary walks me past them all to the last door on the left. No name on it, just a number. 314. Inside, the office is smaller than I expected. A desk with a laptop, 2 monitors, a leather chair, a narrow couch against one wall, the kind psychiatrists use in movies, a mini fridge humming in the corner, one window overlooking the river, the water black and restless under the city lights. Sit, Gary says, and it's not a request. I sit on the couch. The leather is soft, worn smooth in places where other people have sat and waited. Gary pulls a gray blanket from somewhere, a cabinet maybe, and drapes it over my shoulders without asking if I'm cold. Then he's on his phone, voice low and clipped. Doc, I need you at the arcade. 3rd floor, now. A pause. No, not me. Just come. He hangs up, pockets the phone, and crouches in front of me. Eye level. His hands rest on his knees, and I can see the thin white scar across his left knuckles, the calluses on his palms that don't match the expensive suit. I'm fine, I whisper, because that's what you're supposed to say. You're crying in my arcade with a broken watch and bruises forming on your wrist. You're not fine. His eyes, whiskey dark, sharper than they have any right to be, track over my face like he's cataloging damage. Tell me what happened. So I do. The 2 men. The register. The watch. The threat about Gary not protecting nobodies. My voice stays steady until I get to the part where the watch fell, and then it cracks like the crystal. Gary doesn't interrupt. Doesn't move. When I finish, he reaches out and takes my left wrist, the one that's already purpling where the tall man grabbed me, and turns it over in the light. His thumb brushes the bruise with the same careful pressure he used on my chin. Then he stands, walks to his desk, and opens a drawer. He returns with a strip of leather. Dark brown, buttery soft, clearly expensive. Without a word, he takes my father's broken watch from where I'm still clutching it and threads the new band through the pins. His fingers move with precision, no fumbling, like he's done this 1,000 times. When he hands it back, the watch sits properly on my wrist again. The crystal is still cracked, the second hand frozen at 11:52, but it's whole enough to wear. It's not a fix, he says quietly, but it'll hold until we find someone who can do it right. I stare at the watch, at the leather that probably cost more than my rent, at the care in the gesture I don't know how to accept. Thank you, I manage. Don't thank me yet, Brenda. My name, in his voice. I look up sharply and he's watching me with something I can't read. You know my name. I know you count the register twice every night. I know you hide the cinnamon syrup behind the decaf beans because Marco on the day shift uses too much, and it throws off your inventory. I know you wind that watch at 11:45 before you lock the drawer. He tilts his head slightly. I know a lot of things. The air in the room shifts, thickens. I've been invisible for 11 months, and this man, this shadow I've trained myself not to look at, has been watching me the whole time. You're not just anything. His phone buzzes. He glances at it, types something fast. Tino's pulling the security feeds. We'll have their faces in 10 minutes. Who's Tino? Head of security. He's going to want to ask you questions. Gary's jaw tightens. He's also going to wonder why I'm handling this personally instead of calling the police. Why are you? Because they said my name. He says it like that explains everything. Maybe it does. Because they wanted you to think I couldn't protect you, and that's a message meant for me. The door opens without a knock. A woman strides in, tall, dark skin, hair pulled back tight, wearing black jeans and a blazer with a bulge under the left side that I'm pretty sure is a gun. She looks at Gary, then at me, and her expression doesn't change. Mariah, Gary says, lock down the service exits. Pull everyone who worked tonight and get statements. I want to know who saw these men, where they came from, and who let them into the back hallway. On it. She looks at me again, something like approval in her eyes. You okay, honey? I nod because my voice has abandoned me. Good, stay put. She's gone as fast as she arrived. Gary moves to the window, hands in his pockets, shoulders tight. Outside, I hear footsteps in the hallway, voices rising and falling, the sound of the arcade transforming from a place of business into something else, a crime scene, a battleground. Mr. Downey, Gary. He doesn't turn around. If we're doing this, it's Gary. Doing what? Finding the men who touched you, making sure they understand what protection actually means. He's quiet for a moment, watching the river. I'm putting out a quiet order. Any man with ties to the Cobalt crew leaves the city by dawn. Bridges, bus stations, docks. I'll have people watching, not to stop them. To count. I wrap the blanket tighter around my shoulders. That's a lot of people. That's the point. Fear is cheaper than war, and I'd rather empty the city than fill a morgue. He finally turns to face me. But I need you to understand something, Brenda. The minute I ask that question, the minute I show the city I care who made you cry, you stop being invisible. You become leverage, a target, a liability some people will want to test. I'm already a liability. My voice is steadier than I feel. They broke my watch because I work here. That happened whether you help me or not. Something flickers across his face. Respect, maybe. Or recognition. Doc's here, he says as footsteps approach. Let him check you out. Then we'll talk about what happens next. But before the door opens, there's a sharp knock. A man enters, late 30s, wiry build, suspicious eyes that land on me like I'm a problem he didn't ask for. He's holding a tablet. Tino, Gary says. Got the feeds. Tino crosses to the desk, sets the tablet down. 2 men came in through the boutique loading dock at 11:34. Footage shows them coming from the back hallway. That's Cobalt territory, boss. The boutique pays them for protection. Gary's expression doesn't change, but the air around him gets colder. Faces? Tino swipes the screen, and even from the couch, I can see the grainy stills. 2 figures, One tall and lean, one shorter. The image is dark, pulled from a hallway camera, but there's enough light to catch details. Enough light to catch the glint of gold when the tall one laughs. I stand up too fast, the blanket falling from my shoulders. Cross the room before I decide to. Point at the screen. That's them. Tino's eyes narrow. You're sure? I'm sure. I tap the image of the tall man. He has a gold tooth, right side. I saw it when he smiled. Gary and Tino exchange a look I can't read. Then Gary takes the tablet, zooms in on the tall man's face. The grin caught mid-frame, the flash of gold barely visible but there. Get copies of these to everyone on the street, Gary says quietly. And send word to the Cobalt Lieutenant. He has until dawn to hand over these two, and anyone who gave the order. If he doesn't, the count starts, and his crew learns what it's like to run a business with no soldiers. Tino nods once and leaves, tablet in hand. I'm still standing there, staring at the closed door, when Gary speaks behind me. You just made yourself useful, Brenda. That's good. His voice is soft again, but there's something else underneath it now. Something that sounds like a promise. Because useful people in my world don't disappear, they get protected. The watch ticks against my wrist. Frozen at 11:52, the city outside starts counting down to dawn. Doc Fazio leaves 20 minutes later with instructions I don't plan to follow. Rest, ice, avoid stress. He wraps my wrist in an elastic bandage that smells like menthol and tells Gary I'm lucky nothing's broken. Gary doesn't look like he thinks luck has anything to do with it. I'm still on the couch, watching the tablet screen Tino left behind, when I see it. Wait. I lean forward, ignoring the protest in my ribs. Can you play that again? Gary looks up from where he's typing something on his phone. Play what? The footage, the part where they're walking away. He crosses to the desk, swipes back through the timeline, and hits play. The grainy video shows the two men moving down the service hallway, their backs to the camera. The tall one says something, and the shorter one laughs. Then the tall one touches his jaw, quick, reflexive, like scratching an itch. There, I point. He keeps doing that. Watch. Gary rewinds, plays it again. The tall man's hand goes to his jaw 3 times in 15 seconds. Always the same spot. Right side, just below the cheekbone. New dental work, I say. That gold tooth isn't old. He's still getting used to it. Gary's eyes snap to mine. How do you know? My roommate's boyfriend got a crown last year. Touched his face constantly for weeks. I zoom in on the still where the gold glints. And look, there's a chip, shaped like a crescent moon. You don't get that from normal wear. That's from grinding, or maybe biting something you shouldn't. Gary studies the image, then looks at me with something new in his expression. Interest. Calculation. Dental work like that, off the books, cash only. There's only a few places in the city that do it without asking questions. I continue. There was a rumor at my old building. A guy on Delancey operates out of a basement. Does gold work for people who can't go to regular dentists? People with warrants, Gary says quietly. Or people who don't want records. He's already texting. His thumbs move fast across the screen, and 30 seconds later, the door opens. Mariah steps in, followed by Tino and 2 men I don't recognize. Both in dark clothes, both watching me like I'm a puzzle they're trying to solve. Delancey Street, Gary says without preamble. Backroom dentist, Brenda. Thinks our tall friend got gold work done there recently. He turns the tablet so they can see the zoomed image. Crescent chip, right molar, custom work. Tino's skepticism is a physical presence. That's a lot of assumptions based on a rumor. It's a lead, Mariah counters. Better than sitting here waiting for dawn. I know the building, one of the dark-clothed men says. His voice is rough, Brooklyn thick. Green door, basement entrance, buzzer doesn't work. You knock 3 times. Gary nods once. Take 2 cars. Mariah, your lead. Get in, Get the records if they exist. Get out. No noise unless they make it first. What about her? Tino jerks his chin toward me. She stays here. No. The word is out before I can stop it. Everyone turns to look at me, and I force myself to keep talking. I need to see the door. Make sure it's the right place. If it's not, you waste time and those men get further away. Absolutely not, Tino says. She has a point, Mariah says. She's a civilian. She's the only one who can confirm the location. Mariah looks at Gary. She rides in the back car, stays in the vehicle, points out the door. 2 minutes, then she's back here. I can see Gary calculating. The risk versus the reward. The time versus the accuracy. Finally, he looks at me, and his voice drops to that dangerous soft again. You don't leave the car. You don't speak unless spoken to. If anything goes wrong, you get down and you stay down. Understood? Understood. And Brenda? He waits until I meet his eyes. If you're wrong about this, we lose the advantage. If you're right, you just became someone the Cobalt crew has a reason to remember. I touch the watch on my wrist, feel the new leather band Gary gave me. I'm already someone they remember. The ride to Delancey takes 12 minutes. I'm in the back seat of a black sedan, with Mariah driving, and one of the dark-clothed men. He introduced himself as Marco, no last name, riding shotgun. Through the tinted windows, I watch the city blur past. The riverfront gives way to narrower streets, older buildings, the kind of neighborhood where bodegas stay open all night and nobody looks twice at cars with dark windows. Ahead, I can see Tino's vehicle, another black sedan identical to ours. Professional. Anonymous. The kind of cars that don't get remembered. You're either very brave or very stupid, Mariah says, eyes on the road. Probably both, I admit. She laughs, sharp and short. I like you. Against my better judgment, but I like you. Gary seems like he notices things, I say carefully. The till counts. The syrup. My watch. Gary notices everything. It's what keeps him alive. She takes a corner smoothly. No signal. Also what makes him dangerous. He doesn't forget debts, and he sure as hell doesn't forget people who cry in his arcade. The weight of that settles over me like the blanket Gary draped across my shoulders. I'm not invisible anymore. I'm not sure if that's freedom or a different kind of cage. There, I say suddenly, pointing. Green door, 3 steps down. That's it. Mariah slows, doesn't stop. We glide past the building, a narrow brownstone wedged between a laundromat and a closed check-cashing place. The green door is exactly as I remember from the rumor. Paint peeling, no sign, a single bulb burning yellow above the frame. She circles the block while speaking into a radio I didn't notice before. Confirmed location. Green door, basement level, northeast corner of Delancey and Clinton. Tino's voice crackles back. Copy, taking position. We park half a block down, engine running. Through the rear window, I watch Tino and Marco approach the green door. 3 knocks, deliberate. A pause. Then the door opens a crack and they slip inside. Now we wait, Mariah says. 4 minutes pass. 5. I count them on my father's broken watch, the second hand frozen but my pulse racing to fill the silence. Then the door bangs open and Tino emerges, moving fast. Something tucked under his arm. Marco follows, and behind them. Company, Mariah says, and her hand moves to the gun under her blazer. 2 men spill out of the building after Tino and Marco. Not chasing, exactly, but watching. Cobalt lookouts, I realize. They were inside, maybe upstairs, and now they've seen faces they shouldn't have seen. One pulls out a phone. Go, Mariah says into the radio, and Tino's car peels away from the curb, tires shrieking. The lookouts start running. Mariah guns the engine and we shoot forward, but we're on the wrong side of the street, blocked by a delivery truck double parked with its hazards blinking. She curses in Spanish, throws it in reverse, and suddenly we're going backward while ahead I can see the lookouts gaining on Tino's car, one of them shouting into his phone. We swing around the truck, and Mariah accelerates hard. Get down. I drop to the floor between the front and back seats, my ribs screaming in protest. Through the gap between the seats, I can see streetlights strobing past, hear the whine of the engine push too hard. They're on foot, Mariah says. We're fine. We're fine. But we're not fine, because suddenly there are headlights in the rear window. A third car, bigger, faster, coming from a side street we just passed. Back up, Mariah breathes. Hold on. She takes a corner hard enough that I slide across the floor, my shoulder slamming into the door panel. The city becomes a carnival of motion. Sharp turns, running lights, the distant wail of a siren that may or may not be for us. Left! 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 Marco shouts, and Mariah yanks the wheel. We shoot into an alley, narrow, wet, brick walls close enough to scrape the mirrors. The car behind us tries to follow. Can't fit. Has to brake hard. I hear the squeal of tires, the crunch of metal on stone. We burst out the other side into a neighborhood I don't recognize. Mariah keeps driving. Fast, but not reckless, taking random turns until we're sure we're not being followed. Finally, she pulls into a loading zone behind a closed bakery and kills the engine. The silence is enormous. Everyone alive? She asks. Yeah, Marco says. I push myself back onto the seat, breathing hard, my wrist throbbing where I braced against the door. Through the window, I see rain starting to fall, light and cold. Mariah's phone rings. She answers, listens, says, "On our way." "Tino?" Marco asks. "Got clear. He's meeting us at the secondary location." She looks at me in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" I nod, not trusting my voice. 5 minutes later, we pull into an underground parking garage. Tino's car is already there, and so is a third vehicle I recognize, Gary's black Mercedes, parked under a flickering fluorescent. Gary gets out as we approach. His eyes go straight to me, cataloging damage I'm trying to hide. Then he looks at Mariah. "You were followed. Lost them in the garment district. We're clean. Tino? Got what we needed?" Tino emerges from his car holding a leather ledger and a manila envelope. Dentist didn't want to cooperate until Marco explained the alternatives. Gary takes the ledger, flips it open. Even from where I'm standing, I can see rows of handwritten entries, names, dates, services rendered, cash amounts. He stops on one page and his jaw tightens. There. He turns the ledger so I can see. Stephen Kovich, gold crown, right molar, installed October 8th, paid $1,200 cash. The photo paper clipped to the page shows a man with his mouth open wide, a dentist's gloved hand pointing at fresh gold work. The man is grinning despite the awkward angle. It's the tall enforcer. No question. "Crescent chip and everything," Mariah says softly. Gary hands the ledger to Tino, then turns to me. His face is unreadable in the garage's harsh light, but there's something in his eyes that wasn't there before. Curiosity, maybe respect. "Who taught you to notice things like that?" he asks. The question lands heavier than it should. I think about my father's neat handwriting, the ledgers he kept for people who paid in cash and preferred no records. The way he'd point out details other people missed. A watch stopped at the wrong time. A receipt that didn't match the story. Numbers that only made sense if you knew what you were looking for. "My dad," I say quietly. "He kept books." Gary goes very still. Behind him, Tino and Mariah exchange a look. "Books for who?" Gary's voice is careful now. Too careful. "Different people. Small businesses mostly. Places that needed accounting but couldn't afford a real CPA." I wrap my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the humid garage air. His name was Vincent Lucchesi. The silence that follows is absolute. Gary's expression doesn't change, but something behind his eyes does. Recognition, maybe, or memory surfacing from somewhere deep and old. His hands, which had been relaxed at his sides, slowly curl into fists. "Lucchesi," he repeats, and it's not a question. I nod, not understanding why the air in the garage just got thinner, why Tino has gone tense, why Mariah is watching Gary like she's waiting for an explosion. Gary takes a step closer, then another. Stops close enough that I have to tilt my head back to keep eye contact. "Your father," he says slowly, "kept books for who, Brenda?" And I realize, too late, that I've just said something I can't take back. Gary doesn't speak for a long time, just stands there in the garage's flickering light, staring at me like I'm a ghost he wasn't expecting to see. Finally, he turns to Tino and Mariah. "Take the ledger back to the office. Start making calls. I want names of everyone who's used that dentist in the last 6 months, cross-referenced with known Cobalt affiliates." His voice is steady, but there's something underneath it now. Something sharp. "And send the word. Dawn deadline stands." "Boss," Tino starts. "Now." They leave. Mariah catches my eye as she passes, and there's something in her expression that might be sympathy. Or warning. I can't tell which. When their cars pull away, it's just me and Gary in the empty garage. The rain has gotten heavier, drumming on the concrete ramp that leads to street level. Somewhere above us, the city moves through its night. Oblivious. Indifferent. Alive. "Get in the car," Gary says. It's not a request. We don't go back to the arcade. Instead, Gary drives through streets I half recognize, taking turns that feel random but probably aren't. He doesn't speak. Doesn't put on music. Just drives with both hands on the wheel and his jaw tight enough that I can see the muscle jumping. I want to ask where we're going. Want to ask why my father's name made the air in that garage turn to ice. But something tells me to wait. To let the silence stretch until he's ready to fill it. We end up back at the arcade after all. But he takes me up to the 3rd floor through a different entrance. A private elevator that requires a key card and opens directly into his office. The space feels different now. Smaller, like the walls have moved closer since I was here an hour ago. Gary shrugs off his suit jacket, drapes it over the desk chair, and rolls up his sleeves. The gold chain catches the light as he moves. He pours 2 glasses of something amber from the crystal decanter on the shelf, hands me one without asking if I want it. "Sit," he says. I sit on the couch. He doesn't join me. Instead, he leans against the desk, arms crossed, and looks at me with an intensity that makes my skin prickle. "Your father," he says finally. "Vincent Lucchesi. He died 6 years ago. Heart attack, the record says, but it wasn't really that, was it?" My throat closes. "No. He kept books for a crew on the east side. Small operation, protection rackets mostly, some loan sharking. They paid him cash, and he made their numbers look legitimate enough to keep the IRS off their backs." Gary's voice is clinical, factual, like he's reciting from memory. "In 2019, the feds were building a case. They needed records, proof of cash flow, names, dates. They leaned on your father. Offered him immunity if he'd testify." I grip the glass so hard I'm afraid it'll shatter. "He said no." "He said no," Gary confirms. "More than that. He burned the ledger, destroyed the only physical evidence that existed. And when the crew found out the feds had approached him, they beat him badly enough to put him in the hospital for 3 weeks. The room tilts. I knew my father died from his heart. Knew the doctors said the damage was old, chronic, the kind that builds over years. But I never knew why. Never knew what put him in that hospital bed where his heart first learned to fail. "The crew he kept books for," I whisper. "Who were they?" Gary's eyes don't leave mine. "They worked for me." The words land like a physical blow. I set the glass down before I drop it, press my hands flat against my thighs to stop them shaking. "You killed my father," No. His voice is firm. I didn't give the order, and I didn't know they'd gone that far until after. The men who beat him? They're gone. Permanently. I don't tolerate that kind of stupidity. He pauses. But I'm responsible. The ledger he burned would have sent me to prison. He destroyed it to protect people he didn't owe anything to. He died because of my business. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserve to know why I've been watching you. Gary sets his own glass down, and for the first time tonight, he looks almost uncertain. After your father died, I found out he had a daughter. Just one. Working 3 jobs to pay off his medical debt and your mother's cancer bills. Living in a studio in the Bronx that should have been condemned. You've been watching me for 6 years. Peripherally. I made sure you weren't harassed. Made sure the debt collectors didn't get creative. When you applied for the job here, I told HR to hire you. He runs a hand through his hair, disturbing the careful style. I owed your father a debt I couldn't pay, so I paid it to you instead. Quietly. From a distance. Until tonight. Until tonight. He agrees. When those men broke your watch and made you cry in my arcade, they didn't just cross a line, they forced my hand. I can't protect you quietly anymore, Brenda. Not after this. I stand up because sitting feels impossible. Cross to the window because I need to look at something that isn't Gary's face. Outside, the city glitters like broken glass. The river is a dark wound cutting through the lights. I didn't ask for this, I say to the glass. I know. I don't want to be someone's debt. You're not. He moves closer. I hear his footsteps, feel him stop just behind me. You're someone who notices things. Someone who turned a gold tooth into a lead that just gave us leverage over the Cobalt crew. Someone who got in a car despite being terrified because you wanted to help. A pause. You're not cargo, Brenda. You're crucial. I turn to face him. We're close enough that I can see the flecks of gold in his dark eyes, smell the cedar and smoke that clings to his clothes. Close enough to be dangerous. What happens now? Now? Gary's mouth curves into something that's almost a smile. Now the city learns what happens when you make my people cry. Over the next 2 hours, I watch Gary Downey empty a city without firing a single shot. It happens in whispers and phone calls and text messages that spread like virus through the streets. Mariah coordinates from the office next door, her voice steady as she relays orders. Watchers at Port Authority, watchers at Penn Station, watchers at the George Washington Bridge toll booths, not to stop people from leaving, to count them. Through Gary's monitors, I see the footage. A man in a leather jacket stuffing clothes into a duffel at 2:47 a.m., looking over his shoulder every few seconds. A cab line at the bus terminal growing longer, restless, full of faces that keep checking phones. A dockhand lifting a gate at the ferry terminal, waving through 3 cars that shouldn't be there at this hour. Tino sends updates every 15 minutes. 32 confirmed departures. 51. 86. They're running, I say quietly. They're smart, Gary corrects. He's standing at the window with his phone in one hand, watching the same city I am. Fear is cheaper than bullets, and I just made it clear that staying costs more than leaving. What about the Cobalt lieutenant? The one who gave the order? He's got until dawn to hand over Kovac and his partner. If he doesn't, his crew scatters and he's running a ghost operation by Monday. Gary glances at his watch. An expensive piece that makes my father's Seiko look like a toy. 4 hours until sunrise. Let's see how loyal he is. Doc Fazio returns at 3:15 a.m., with actual medical tape and disapproval radiating off him like heat. He makes me lift my shirt, prods my ribs with professional disinterest, and wraps them tight enough that breathing becomes a deliberate act. Bruised, not broken, he announces. But you need to rest. Actual rest, not whatever this is. He gestures vaguely at the office, the monitors, the situation. She's resting, Gary says from the doorway. She's working. Doc snaps his bag closed. There's a difference. But he leaves, and Gary brings me coffee. Real coffee, not the cheap instant I make at home, but something dark and rich that tastes like it costs more per cup than my hourly wage. He hands it to me without ceremony, then returns to his desk where he's been cross-referencing the dentist's ledger with known Cobalt associates. You didn't make this, I say. He looks up, confused. What? The coffee. I didn't make it. First time in 11 months someone's made me coffee in this building. Something shifts in his expression. Softens. Well, first time for everything. We work in silence after that. I don't know what I'm doing exactly. Watching, feeds, pointing out faces when I recognize them from the arcade, existing in the same space as a man who's systematically dismantling a rival crew because 2 of their soldiers made me cry. It should feel wrong. Should feel dangerous. Instead, it feels like the first night in years I'm not holding my breath. At 4:30 a.m., Gary's phone rings. He listens, says 3 words, "Bring me proof," and hangs up. What is it? I ask. Cobalt Lieutenant wants to negotiate, says he's got information on Kovach's location, but he wants terms first. Gary's smile is cold. He's got 30 minutes to deliver, or the count continues and I double the exit fee for anyone still in the city by sunrise. Exit fee. Anyone who wants to leave after dawn pays 10% of their liquid assets to do so. Voluntarily, of course. The smile widens. Amazing how voluntary things become when the alternative is staying in a city that suddenly feels very small. I should be horrified. Should find this entire operation brutal and wrong. But all I can think about is the sound my father's watch made when it hit the tile. The laugh in Stephen Kovach's voice when he said Gary couldn't protect nobodies. I want to be there, I say. When they find him. No. Gary. No. He stands, crosses to where I'm sitting, and crouches down so we're eye level. You've done enough tonight. You spotted the tell, confirmed the location, gave us leverage we wouldn't have had, but watching what comes next? That's not something you can unsee. I'm not a child. I know. His hand moves, hovers near my face, doesn't quite touch. But you're also not someone who should have to watch men bleed because they made you bleed first. Let me carry that. It's what I'm good at. The air between us feels charged, dangerous. His eyes drop to my mouth, then back up. Neither of us moves. Thank you, I whisper. Don't thank me. His voice has gone rough. Respect me. Respect that I'm trying to keep some part of you clean in all this. What if I don't want to be clean? His jaw tightens. Brenda? What if I want to own my part of this? What if I'm tired of being protected from a distance? I lean forward and our faces are inches apart. You said I'm not cargo. Prove it. Let me choose. For a long moment, he doesn't speak. Just looks at me like he's seeing something he didn't expect. Something that might be dangerous or might be exactly what he needs. The roof, he says finally. We go to the roof. You want air? You want to think? Fine. But you're not riding to that motel, and that's final. It's a compromise I didn't ask for, but I take it because it's the closest thing to respect I'm going to get tonight. The rooftop is cold and wet and beautiful. The river spreads out below us, black and restless under a sky that's just starting to pale at the edges. The city is a scatter of lights in all directions. Some moving, some still. All of them part of the machine that Gary Downey is quietly taking apart, with phone calls and whispered threats. We stand near the edge, not speaking. The wind smells like rain and river water, and the distant promise of dawn. My ribs ache. My wrist throbs. My father's broken watch ticks its frozen time against my skin. My dad would have hated you, I say quietly. Gary's mouth quirks. Probably. He would have hated what you do, how you do it. Yes. But he saved you anyway. Yes. Gary turns to look at me, and there's something raw in his face now, something that looks almost like regret. He saved me because that's who he was, and I've spent 6 years trying to figure out how to deserve it. By watching his daughter from the shadows? By making sure his daughter got to live the life he wanted for her. Quietly. Safely. Without ever knowing what he did. He looks back at the city. Tonight broke that. I'm sorry. I'm not, I say, and I mean it. Our hands are resting on the same railing, inches apart. The space between them feels enormous and non-existent at the same time. I could close the distance, could reach over and touch his fingers with mine and see what happens when the man who's been watching me for 6 years realizes I'm watching him back. Before I can decide, his phone rings. Tino's voice, tinny through the speaker. Boss, we got them, both of them. Motel off the trucking yard just like you said. Kovac and his partner, plus the lieutenant who gave the order. They're boxed in. Say the word and we move. Gary looks at me, waits. I nod once. Bring them to the loading bay, Gary says into the phone. Alive, I want them to see sunrise. He hangs up, pockets the phone and turns to me fully. The sky behind him is starting to gray, dawn creeping in like something inevitable. Last chance to stay clean, he says. I think about my father's burned ledger. About 6 years of careful distance. About tears that cut through flour dust and the sound of breaking glass. I stopped being clean when they broke my watch, I tell him. Let's finish this. We descend from the roof as dawn starts to sketch the edges of buildings in pale gold. My ribs protest every step, and the coffee doc Fazio told me not to drink sits acid in my stomach. Gary walks half a step ahead, his phone glowing in his hand as messages stream in. Updates, confirmations, the digital pulse of a city reorganizing itself around his will. In the office, Mariah is waiting with a tablet and dark circles under her eyes. She looks at Gary, then at me, and something passes between them that I can't read. Counts at 216, she says. Buses, trains, personal vehicles. We've got photos of about 60%. Names on maybe half of those. The Cobalt lieutenant? Singing. Gave up Kovac's partner, guy named Dennis Ruiz, shorter one from the footage. Also confirmed the boutique's been their laundering front for 8 months. Mariah swipes through images on the tablet. They've been using the arcade's legitimacy as cover. Your vendors, your alt, foot traffic, your reputation. Every dollar they washed looked cleaner because it passed through your building first. Gary's expression doesn't change, but I feel the temperature in the room drop. So they didn't just rob my employee, they've been stealing from me for 8 months. Essentially. He's quiet for a long moment, staring at something I can't see. Then, where's Kovac now? Motel room. Tino's got 4 men on the perimeter. They're not going anywhere. I stand by the window, watching the river turn from black to gray, to something almost silver as the light changes. Behind me, Gary and Mariah discuss logistics in voices too low for me to follow. But I'm not really listening anymore. I'm thinking about the math. 216 people left the city tonight because Gary Downey decided I was worth protecting. 2 men are cornered in a motel room, waiting for consequences they probably saw coming. A lieutenant is cooperating to save his own skin. And somewhere in all of this, there are police who should be handling it. Courts that should be judging it. Laws that should apply. But laws are slow. And I've learned the hard way that slow justice is often no justice at all. My father's medical bills were legal. The interest rates that keep me poor are legal. The system that let him die protecting people who barely remembered his name, that was legal too. What Gary's doing isn't legal, but it's fast and it's certain, and for the first time in 6 years, someone is treating my pain like it matters more than paperwork. Brenda, I turn. Gary's watching me with that intensity that makes my skin feel too tight. You're thinking, he says. I'm always thinking. You're thinking about calling the police. It's not a question. About doing this the right way. I don't deny it. Would you stop me? No. He crosses to where I'm standing, stops close enough that I have to tilt my head back. But I'd ask you what you think happens if you do. You file a report. They take statements. Maybe they find Kovac and Ruiz, maybe they don't. Maybe a DA decides to prosecute. Maybe the case gets buried under 50 others just like it. Maybe in 2 years you get to sit in a courtroom and watch them take a plea deal for assault. 3 months suspended, time served. And your way? My way, they answer for what they did tonight. Not in 2 years. Not in some plea deal. Now. His voice is soft, dangerous. And every person who thought about touching you after tonight will remember what happened to the last ones who tried. That's not justice. That's revenge. Sometimes they're the same thing. The city outside is waking up. I can see cars on the distant bridge, lights in windows across the river. Normal people starting normal days, unaware that underneath the ordinary surface, something has shifted. If I let you do this, I say quietly, I'm complicit. Yes. If I don't, those men walk away believing I'm weak. Yes. So I don't really have a choice. You have a choice. Gary's hand lifts, hovers near my face, drops. The question is whether you can live with either option. I look at my father's broken watch. Think about the ledger he burned, the beating he took, the 6 years of silence he kept to protect people who didn't protect him back. He made a choice too. Lived with it. Died with it. Maybe this is what inheritance looks like in families like mine. Do it, I whisper. Whatever you're going to do, but don't tell me the details. I don't need to know how the machinery works. Something that might be respect flickers across Gary's face. All right. But Gary... I wait until he meets my eyes. After this is done, I'm leaving. Going back to my apartment, my life. I can't be part of this world. Yes, you can. He says it with absolute certainty. You already are. Before I can argue, he's moving to his desk, pulling open a drawer, removing a single sheet of paper. He sets it on the desk between us like a chess piece. What's this? A job offer. Night operations coordinator. You'd oversee closing procedures, manage the late shift, handle vendor relations and security protocols. He taps the paper. $48,000 a year plus benefits. Tuition stipend if you want to finish school. Company housing available if you prefer. The number hits me like cold water. 48,000. More than I've ever made. Enough to clear my father's medical debt in 2 years instead of 10. Enough to stop living in survival mode. I can't accept this. Why not? Because it's charity. Because you're trying to pay off your guilt about my father by... Gary picks up the paper and tears it cleanly in half, then in half again. The pieces flutter to the desk like snow. I stare at him. What are you doing? Proving it's not charity. He leans against the desk, arms crossed. I need someone in that role, Brenda. Genuinely need them. The last coordinator quit 3 months ago because he couldn't handle the pressure. Since then, I've had 3 theft incidents, 2 vendor disputes, and a staff complaint about unsafe closing procedures. He nods toward me. You counted the till twice tonight even after you'd been assaulted. You noticed a gold tooth in grainy footage that 3 of my security people missed. You got in a car that might have gotten you killed because you wanted to be useful instead of safe. That's not a qualification. That's stupidity. That's initiative. That's attention to detail. That's someone who understands that details matter in places like this. He pulls a fresh sheet of paper from the drawer, starts writing by hand. New offer. Night operations coordinator. 48,000. No charity, no guilt. Just a job that needs doing and a person who can do it. He slides the paper across the desk. At the bottom, there's a line for a signature. Above it, everything he just described, spelled out in clean, clinical terms that have nothing to do with my father, or tears, or broken watches. Think about it, he says. You don't have to decide now. But before I can respond, his phone rings. Not his regular phone, a different one, older, that he pulls from his jacket pocket with a frown. Who has this number? I ask. Almost no one. He looks at the screen, and his expression hardens. It's the espresso bar landline. He puts it on speaker. The voice that comes through is male, young, cocky in the way people are when they're reading from a script someone else wrote. Mr. Downey, hope you're having a good night. We left something for you downstairs. You might want to check your voicemail. Click. Dead air. Gary's already moving, and I follow because staying alone in this office feels more dangerous than whatever's waiting below. Mariah appears from the next room, gun drawn, and the three of us take the stairs because the elevator is too slow and too exposed. The arcade floor is empty, still closed, morning light just starting to filter through the front windows. Everything looks normal. The slot machines dark, the boutiques shuttered, the espresso bar exactly as I left it. Except there's a phone on the counter. A cheap burner with a green light blinking. Gary picks it up carefully, like it might bite. Presses play on the voicemail. The voice is different this time. Older, rougher, with an accent I can't place. Downey, you've made your point. The city's bleeding personnel, and my operation is feeling the squeeze. So here's the counter. Sunrise sit down, neutral ground, or we burn your pretty arcade to the foundation and make sure your new girl's face is on the news as collateral. The message ends. Mariah's already checking sightlines, covering angles. Could be a bluff. Could be, Gary agrees, or they're desperate enough to escalate. I look at the burner phone, then at Gary. What's neutral ground? Somewhere neither side controls. Usually public enough that violence costs too much. He's already texting, fingers moving fast. They want to negotiate, means they're weaker than they're pretending. Or it's a trap. That too. He looks at me. Either way, we're not letting them anywhere near this building. Mariah, pull everyone off the perimeter and put them on the arcade. No one in or out except staff, and staff gets searched. Where's the meat? Mariah asks. Gary thinks for a moment, then smiles. It's not a nice smile. The Lighthouse Diner. 6 a.m., public, cameras, cops drink coffee there during shift change. They want neutral, they can have it. But I'm bringing the Delancey ledger and the overnight head count. Let them negotiate from a position of having nothing left to negotiate with. He turns to me. You stay here. Mariah stays with you. Tino and I handle the sit-down. No. The word comes out before I can stop it. If this is about me, I should be there. If this is about you, you're exactly the leverage they want. You stay here where you're safe. Gary. This isn't negotiable, Brenda. His voice goes hard. You wanted to own your part of this? Fine. Your part is staying alive so I don't have to burn the entire city down looking for who took you. Understand? I want to argue. Want to push back against being protected like cargo again. But there's something in his face. Something raw and frightened underneath the control that stops me. Okay, I whisper. He nods once, then heads for the door. Mariah moves to follow, but he waves her off. Stay with her. I've got Tino. The door closes behind him, and suddenly it's just me and Mariah in the empty arcade with dawn pressing against the windows and the burner phone still blinking on the counter. He cares about you, Mariah says quietly. More than he should. More than is safe for either of you. I know. Do you? She turns to look at me. Because men like Gary don't care quietly. They care loud and messy and dangerously. And when someone threatens what they care about, they burn the world. I touch my father's watch. Then we better make sure he doesn't have to. 40 minutes later, the loading bay door grinds open, and Tino's voice crackles over the radio Mariah gave me. Package delivered. 2 items, gift wrapped. Boss wants you downstairs. Mariah and I exchange a look. Then we're moving, through the arcade, down the service stairs, into the concrete cavern of the loading bay, where trucks usually deliver slot machines and liquor and everything else that keeps a place like this running. Fluorescent lights hum overhead. The space smells like diesel and old rain. In the center, kneeling on the concrete with their hands bound behind their backs, are 2 men. Stephen Kovach, tall and lean with a gold tooth catching the light. Dennis Ruiz, shorter and stocky, with blood dried under his nose. Their eyes are mean, defiant. But underneath, I can see it. The fear that comes from knowing you've miscalculated badly. Gary stands in front of them, hands in his pockets, looking almost casual. Tino and 3 other men form a loose perimeter. The cameras in the corners blink their red recording lights. When Gary sees me, he nods once. Permission. Acknowledgement. I step forward and Stephen Kovach's eyes track to me. Recognition flares, then something uglier. You, he says, and his voice is exactly as I remember. Sharp, mocking, certain. The little nobody. Gary's hand moves, fast, economical, and the sound of the slap echoes through the loading bay. Kovach's head snaps sideways, and when he straightens, there's blood on his lip. Try again, Gary says softly, this time with respect. Kovach spits blood onto the concrete, says nothing. Gary looks at me. Last chance to leave. I think about my father's watch, about tears that cut through flour dust, about 216 people who fled the city tonight because one man decided I was worth protecting. I'm staying, I say. Gary's smile is cold and certain and terrifying. Then let's finish this. Gary turns to me before anything else happens. Catwalk. You watch from there. It's not a suggestion. Mariah guides me to the metal stairs that lead to the observation platform, the kind supervisors use to oversee loading operations, clipboard in hand, making sure nobody steals the expensive liquor. From up here, I have a clear view of the entire bay. The kneeling men, Gary standing in front of them like a judge, Tino and his team forming a loose perimeter, and the cameras in every corner blinking their steady red rhythm. Recording everything. That's intentional, I realize. Whatever happens next, Gary wants it documented. The fluorescent lights hum their electric song. The concrete floor is stained with oil and old water, and in the far corner, a loading door is cracked open just enough to let in the smell of dawn. Wet pavement, river water, the city exhaling after a long night. Gary removes his suit jacket, hands it to Tino, and rolls his sleeves to his elbows with careful precision. The gold chain at his throat catches the light. He looks like something between a businessman and an executioner, and I can't tell which role he's preparing for. He walks a slow circle around the 2 men, not speaking. Just looking. Studying them the way you'd study a problem that needs solving. Stephen Kovach keeps his eyes straight ahead, jaw tight. Dennis Ruiz watches Gary's feet, tracking his movement like prey watching a predator. Finally, Gary stops in front of Kovach, crouches down so they're eye level. When he speaks, his voice is conversational, almost friendly. You know what's interesting about tonight? I learned something about myself. He tilts his head. I learned that I've gotten soft, complacent. I've been letting people think my protection is negotiable, that my word has conditions. He pauses. You helped me realize that's a problem. So thank you. Kovach's gold tooth glints when his lip curls. You're welcome. The slap comes fast enough that I flinch on the catwalk. Kovach's head snaps sideways, and when he straightens, there's fresh blood on the split Gary opened earlier. I wasn't done talking, Gary says in that same friendly tone. When I'm done, you'll know because I'll ask you a question. Until then, you keep that mouth closed unless you want me to close it for you. Kovach says nothing, but his eyes have changed, the defiance draining into something more careful. Gary stands, brushes off his knees, and looks at both men. Here's what's going to happen. I'm going to ask you the same question I asked the woman you hurt tonight. You're going to answer truthfully, on camera, and then we're all going to make some decisions about your future. Sound fair? Neither man responds. I'll take that as agreement. Gary glances up at the cameras, making sure they're catching his face, his words, everything. Then he looks back down at Kovac. Who made you cry? The question lands wrong. Kovac frowns, confused. What? That's what I asked her. Brenda Lucchesi, the woman whose wrist you bruised and whose watch you broke. I saw her crying and I asked who made you cry. Gary's voice is still soft, still friendly, and somehow that makes it worse. Now I'm asking you. Who sent you into my arcade? Who told you to embarrass me on my own floor? Who decided that threatening my employee was good strategy? The silence stretches. Kovac glances at Ruiz, some unspoken communication passing between them. Then Ruiz breaks first. Lieutenant Paulo, he says, voice hoarse. Cobalt crew. He gave the order. Shut up, Kovac hisses. Lieutenant Paulo, Gary repeats, like he's tasting the name. And what exactly were his instructions? Make noise, Ruiz continues, the words spilling out faster now. Show that you couldn't keep your own house clean. Take something small, money, watch, doesn't matter. Just enough to prove you were vulnerable. He swallows hard. We weren't supposed to hurt her, just scare her. Show that your protection was for show. But you did hurt her. It's not a question. She fought back, got loud. You had to put your hands on a woman half your size to do a job you were too incompetent to do quietly. Gary's voice has gone flat. You damaged my employee, destroyed her property, made her cry in my building. And for what? To deliver a message from a lieutenant who didn't have the spine to deliver it himself? From the catwalk, I watch Kovac's face cycle through calculations. He's looking for the angle, the escape route, the way to talk himself into something other than what's coming. We can make this right. Kovac tries. We know things. Paulo's operation, his contacts, I already know everything. Gary pulls a folded paper from his pocket. The Delancey ledger page with Kovac's photo. His grinning face and that gold tooth on full display. Backroom dentist on Delancey. Stephen Kovac, October 8th, 1200 cash. Your partner here is in the same ledger. Dental work, weapon purchases, 2 prostitutes Paulo paid for as a bonus. He holds up the paper like evidence in court. I know where you live. Where your mother lives in Atlantic City. Where your ex-wife works in Newark. I know your parole officer's name and how many months you have left on probation. Kovac's face goes pale. So when I say I don't need what you know, understand that I mean it literally. You have nothing I want except one thing. Gary crouches again, close enough that his voice drops to almost a whisper. I want you to say it. On camera. Who sent you? What you were told to do? And who you answer to. Clean and simple. Then we talk about what happens next. The loading bay is absolutely silent except for the fluorescent hum and the distant sound of the city waking up. I grip the catwalk railing, my palms slick with sweat. This isn't violence, not the kind I expected. This is something colder, more permanent. Lieutenant Paulo, Kovac says finally, his voice gone flat. Cobalt crew, East Side operations. He sent us to hit your employee, make you look weak. Show that your protection was negotiable. And the boutique? Laundering front, 8 months. We've been washing cash through your arcade, using your reputation as cover. Gary stands, pulls out his phone, and takes a photo of both men with the timestamp visible. Then he turns to Tino. Contracts. Tino produces 2 sheets of paper and 2 pens. Sets them on the concrete in front of the kneeling men. You're going to sign statements, Gary says. Everything you just told me, written down, dated, witnessed. Then you're going to leave this city and not come back. Ever. You're going to tell Paulo that Gary Downey doesn't negotiate with people who hurt his employees. And you're going to make sure every person in the Cobalt crew understands what happens when they mistake mercy for weakness. And if we don't sign? Kovac asks. Then Tino drives you to the river, and we find out if you float. Gary says it without emotion, like he's describing the weather. But I don't think you want that. I think you want to choose the door that leads to somewhere that isn't a body bag. Am I right? Ruiz reaches for the pen first. His hands are shaking, but he signs, messy, fast, desperate. Kovac holds out longer, pride warring with survival, but eventually he signs too. Gary collects the papers, folds them carefully, and slides them into his jacket pocket. Then he nods to Tino. Take them to the George Washington Bridge, north side. Let them walk across and choose any direction that isn't back toward New York. If they're still in the city by noon, they go in the river. Make sure they understand that's not a metaphor. Boss? Tino gestures to his team, and they haul both men to their feet. Kovac and Ruiz stumble, hands still bound, being walked toward a van idling by the loading door. Before they disappear, Gary calls out, Kovac. The tall man stops, looks back. Your gold tooth? Gary's smile is cold. Get it replaced. Every time someone sees it from now on, they're going to remember the night you made the wrong woman cry. Then they're gone, loaded into the van, door sliding shut, engine rumbling to life. The sound fades into the city's morning traffic, and suddenly the loading bay feels too big, too empty. Mariah appears next to me on the catwalk. That's how he does it. No bodies, no mess. Just consequences that keep walking around, reminding people what happens when they cross him. It's terrifying, I whisper. It's efficient. She looks at me. And it's why you're still breathing. In someone else's world, you'd be the example. In his, you're the reason he makes examples. Below, Gary is texting rapid fire, his phone glowing in his hand. Then he looks up at me, and even from here I can see the exhaustion pulling at the edges of his control. Tino's updates? Mariah asks into her radio. The response crackles back. Counts at 281, buses are packed, train stations too, words spreading faster than we're tracking, Cobalt's bleeding personnel by the hour. Gary climbs the stairs to the catwalk, his footsteps ringing on the metal. When he reaches us, he leans against the railing and looks out over the empty loading bay like a general surveying a battlefield. Paulo's asked for the sit-down, he says. 6 a.m. Lighthouse Diner. He's bringing his remaining lieutenants and a proposal. Think he'll show? Mariah asks. He'll show. He doesn't have a choice. Gary checks his watch, the expensive one that makes my father's Seiko look like a child's toy. 90 minutes until sunrise. Let's see what he thinks he can negotiate with. He turns to me, and something in his expression shifts. The general fades, and what's left is just a man who's been awake all night, making decisions that would break most people. Come with me to breakfast, he says. It's not a command, not quite a request. Something in between that feels like trust. I look at my father's watch, the cracked crystal, the frozen hands, the leather band Gary gave me that still smells like cedar and smoke. I think about 281 people fleeing a city because one man asked who made you cry. Okay, I say. Below, the loading bay door opens wider, and dawn spills in. Pale, cold, and absolutely certain. The night is ending. The city is emptying. And somewhere across the river, Lieutenant Paulo is learning that fear is cheaper than war, and Gary Downey's protection isn't negotiable anymore. Gary offers me his arm, formal and old-fashioned, and I take it because my ribs hurt and my wrist aches and I'm so tired I can barely stand. Breakfast, he says again, softer this time. Then we finish this. We walk toward the light together. The Lighthouse Diner sits on a corner where the industrial waterfront meets the neighborhoods people actually live in. Chrome and vinyl booths, a counter with red stools, windows that haven't been updated since 1987. The kind of place where fishermen drink coffee at 5 a.m. before heading to the docks, where cops on shift change eat eggs that taste like every other diner egg in the city, where nobody looks too closely at anyone else's business. Neutral ground. Gary's Mercedes pulls up at 5:52 a.m., the sky behind us a watercolor of gray and pink and pale gold. He kills the engine but doesn't move immediately. Just sits there, hands on the wheel, staring at the diner's neon sign like it holds answers to questions he hasn't asked yet. "You don't have to come in," he says without looking at me. "You can wait in the car with Mariah. This is just paperwork now. Boring negotiation." "Boring negotiation doesn't need 4 armed men." I nod toward Tino's car, which pulled up behind us 30 seconds ago. Through the rear window, I can see Tino and 3 others, the same team from the loading bay, still wearing the exhaustion of a night spent hunting. Gary's mouth quirks. "Fair point. Besides," I continue, "you said I'm not cargo." "Cargo waits in the car. People walk through doors." He finally looks at me, and there's something in his eyes that might be pride or might be concern. Maybe both. People also become targets when they walk through doors with me. Last chance to stay invisible, Brenda. I touch my father's watch. I think we're past that. "Yeah." He opens his door. "I think we are." Inside, the diner smells like coffee and bacon grease and the particular kind of tired that comes from serving breakfast at hours when most people are still asleep. There are 5 customers scattered across the booths, 2 fishermen in waterproof jackets, a nurse in scrubs staring at her phone, a couple who look like they've been fighting all night and are too exhausted to continue. And in the back corner booth, 3 men in dark suits that cost more than this diner makes in a month. Cobalt crew. The one in the middle is older, 50 maybe, with silver hair and a face that's seen too many negotiations to trust any of them. His eyes track Gary as we enter, and something flickers across his expression. Not fear, exactly. More like resignation. We slide into the booth across from them, Gary in the middle, me on his right, Mariah on his left. Tino and his team take positions at the counter, backs to us but reflected in the mirrored wall behind the grill. Watching everything. The waitress appears. 60-something, bleached hair, an expression that says she's seen stranger things than 2 crews meeting over coffee. She fills our mugs without asking, tops off the cobalt side, and disappears without taking an order. "Downey," the silver-haired man says. His voice is gravelly, Brooklyn-born. "Appreciate you meeting. Paolo." Gary adds cream to his coffee with deliberate precision. "You wanted neutral ground? Here we are." "Yeah, about that." Paolo slides a duffel bag across the table, black nylon, bulging. 40,000. Call it a peace offering. Payment for the misunderstanding last night. Gary doesn't touch the bag. Doesn't even look at it. Just sips his coffee and watches Paolo over the rim of the mug. "Misunderstanding," he repeats. "That's what you're calling it." "My men got overzealous. I've dealt with them." Paolo's eyes flick to me, then away. "The woman gets compensation, you keep the arcade, we go back to business as usual. Clean slate." "No." The word drops like a stone into still water. Paolo's expression tightens. "No?" Gary sets down his coffee mug with a soft click. Then he reaches into his jacket and pulls out a folded piece of paper. Unfolds it slowly, smooths it flat on the table between them. Even upside down, I can see it's a list. Names and timestamps, printed in neat columns. 281 people, Gary says conversationally. That's how many of your associates, employees, and affiliates left New York City between midnight and dawn this morning. Buses, trains, personal vehicles. We've got photos of most of them. Names on about 70%. He taps the paper. "This is what your crew looks like now, Paolo. A membership roster that fits on one page." Paolo's jaw works. One of his lieutenants leans in to whisper something, but Paolo waves him off. "You made your point," Paolo says. "You've got reach. We respect that. Hence the peace offering." "I don't want peace." Gary slides another document across the table. The ledger page from the Delancey dentist, Kovach's grinning face with the gold tooth on full display. "I want accountability. Stephen Kovach, Dennis Ruiz. Your men, your orders. They hit my employee to send me a message. But what's interesting is what else we found." He produces a third document, photocopies of the dentist's ledger, pages of handwritten entries with names and crew affiliations circled in red. Paulo's face goes carefully blank as he recognizes what he's looking at. 8 months, Gary continues. You've been using the boutique on my arcade floor to launder cash. Every dollar you washed looked legitimate because it passed through my building, mixed with my vendors, my foot traffic, my reputation. He leans back, and his voice drops to that dangerous soft. You weren't just embarrassing me, Paulo. You were stealing from me, using me as cover while you built your little operation. That's a serious accusation, Paulo says carefully. It's a documented fact. Gary taps the ledger copies. Patient names cross-referenced with known Cobalt affiliates. Dates that match casino nights at the boutique. Payment amounts that correspond with deposits in offshore accounts we've already traced. He smiles, and it's not friendly. I've had a very productive night, Paulo. Want to guess what else I found? The silence stretches. The fishermen in the corner booth pay their check and leave. The nurse scrolls through her phone, oblivious. The fighting couple stares at their cold eggs. Finally, Paulo speaks. What do you want? Simple terms. Gary counts on his fingers. 1. You relinquish all claims to the arcade and the boutique. The lease terminates, you pay the early termination fee, and you never set foot in my building again. 2. You pay restitution to every employee who worked the arcade in the last 8 months. Danger pay for operating in a space you contaminated. I'll determine the amounts. You'll write the checks. 3. You sign a no-touch clause. This woman... He nods toward me. Brenda Lucchesi. Her name goes on a list that every crew in the city respects. She doesn't get followed, doesn't get photographed, doesn't get used as leverage. She's off limits. Permanently. And if we don't agree? One of the lieutenants asks. Gary's smile widens. Then I release the ledger to the district attorney with a note about your laundering operation. I testify that you've been using my business as cover without my knowledge or consent. And I keep the exodus going until the Cobalt crew is a footnote in someone's dissertation about failed criminal enterprises. He leans forward. Or you sign the papers, take your remaining people, and rebuild somewhere that isn't my territory. Your choice. But choose fast because my coffee's getting cold. Paulo looks at the list of names, the ledger copies, the duffel of cash that Gary hasn't touched. He's doing the math, weighing his remaining leverage against the cost of refusal. The no-touch clause, he says finally. That includes all of Cobalt, even after I'm gone? It includes everyone with a brain. Word will spread. Anyone who touches her answers to me personally. Gary's eyes are flat, emotionless. That's non-negotiable. Paulo nods slowly. Then he gestures to one of his lieutenants, who produces a leather portfolio from his briefcase. The waitress reappears with a fresh pot of coffee, tops off all the mugs like this is Tuesday morning, and these are normal customers discussing normal business. Draft the papers, Paulo says. We'll sign. It takes 20 minutes. Mariah has the documents ready on her tablet. She's been drafting them for the last hour, anticipating this exact outcome. She prints them on a portable printer she pulls from her bag, and both sides review the terms with lawyers on speakerphone who sound annoyed to be awake this early. The boutique lease termination. Signed. The restitution agreement. Signed. The no-touch clause. Signed. Witnessed. Notarized by a mobile notary Tino called, who shows up in a bathrobe and charges double for the hour. When it's done, Paulo slides the papers back across the table. Gary doesn't look at them, just hands them to Mariah, who tucks them into her bag like they're receipts from a grocery run. Pleasure doing business, Gary says, though his tone suggests it was anything but. Paulo stands, his lieutenants following. At the door, he pauses and looks back at me. His expression is unreadable. You know what you cost me? He asks. Respect, Gary answers before I can. You cost yourself respect when you thought tears meant weakness. She just made you pay for the lesson. Paulo leaves without responding. Through the window, I watch the three of them climb into a black SUV and pull away, disappearing into the morning traffic like they were never there at all. The waitress appears with breakfast plates we didn't order. Eggs, bacon, toast, hash browns. She sets them down with a wink. On the house, she says. You boys, she looks at me. And lady, look like you earned it. Tino and his team move to a nearby booth, finally allowing themselves to relax. Mariah checks her phone, scrolling through updates, and reports quietly. Exit counts at 312. Buses are still running full. Train stations are clearing. By noon, the east side's going to be a ghost town. Gary doesn't touch his food, just stares out the window at the sunrise, painting the city in shades of gold and copper. His coffee sits steaming between his hands, forgotten. I eat because my body is demanding fuel after a night that felt like a year. The eggs are good. The bacon is perfect. Normal breakfast in an abnormal morning. You okay? I ask Gary quietly. He turns to look at me, and there's something in his face I haven't seen before. Vulnerability? Maybe. Or exhaustion so deep it's passed through tired into something else. I need to tell you something, he says. Before he can continue, the diner door opens and a news van pulls up outside. Local station, morning crew, camera equipment. They're setting up for a street shot. The reporter gesturing toward the riverfront, where something is happening that they're late to cover. Gary watches them with an expression I can't read. Then he stands, drops $200 bills on the table, and offers me his hand. Come on, he says. Let's get you somewhere private. I have one more truth to give you, and you're going to want to sit down for it. Outside, the city is waking up. Lighter, emptier, and somehow more dangerous for everyone who thought tears meant weakness. Gary's Mercedes is warm and quiet, and as we pull away from the diner, I watch the news crew in the side mirror, scrambling to catch a story that's already over. What truth? I ask. Gary's hands tighten on the wheel. The one about why I really kept watching you all these years, and why letting you go now might be the hardest thing I've ever done. The river glitters beside us, and dawn finally breaks full and certain over the city that just learned what Gary Downey's protection really means. The arcade is quiet when we return, not the usual closed-for-business quiet, but something deeper. The quiet of a place that's been held under siege and survived. Gary parks in his private spot and leads me through the service entrance, past the espresso bar where my father's watch first broke, past the boutique that will soon have a for lease sign in the window, past all the careful normalcy that's been stripped away to reveal what this place really is. A fortress, a kingdom, a place where one man's word is the only law that matters. We take the private elevator to the 3rd floor, but instead of going to his office, Gary leads me to a different door, unmarked, requiring a second key card. Behind it, a narrow staircase spirals up into darkness. Where are we going? I ask. The roof. He climbs ahead of me, and I follow because I've followed him through too much tonight to stop now. It's the only place in this building where I can think clearly. The door at the top opens onto a flat expanse of tar and gravel, surrounded by a waist-high ledge that does nothing to make the height feel safe. The river spreads out below us, black, turning to deep blue as dawn progresses, the water restless with current and wind. Across the distance, the city rises in layers, buildings stacked like promises, windows catching the early light, bridges spanning the gaps between here and there. The air smells like water and exhaust, and the particular cold that comes right before sunrise gives way to morning. My breath fogs when I exhale, and I wrap my arms around myself despite the blanket Gary draped over my shoulders at some point I don't remember. He walks to the edge and leans against the ledge, looking out at the city like a general surveying territory he's just reclaimed. For a long moment, he doesn't speak. Just stands there with the wind pulling at his shirt, his tie loosened, his sleeves still rolled up from the loading bay. Your father, he says finally, burned that ledger on a Thursday night in March, 6 years ago. I know because I was supposed to be in court the following Monday. Federal racketeering charges, They had everything except the physical evidence. Without that ledger, the case collapsed. I moved to stand beside him, close enough that our shoulders almost touch. Below, a garbage truck makes its rounds, the hydraulic whine carrying across the water. He could have turned state's witness, Gary continues, could have taken immunity and testified. Instead, he went to the office where he kept his files, poured lighter fluid over everything, and lit a match. The sprinklers put it out eventually, but the ledger was ash, along with every record that could have traced cash back to operations I ran. The crew beat him for it, I say quietly. You told me that part. They did. But what I didn't tell you was that I didn't know until after. I was in a different state, meeting with lawyers, trying to prepare for a trial I thought was inevitable. His voice goes rough. When I found out what happened, what they'd done to him because they thought he might flip, I came back and cleaned house. 4 men gone in 2 days. The rest of the crew learned that there are rules even in this world, and protecting your own is the first one. The sun breaks over the horizon, sudden and gold, painting everything in shades of amber and rose. Gary's face in profile looks carved from something harder than flesh, jaw tight, eyes distant, carrying weight I'm only beginning to understand. I asked around about Vincent Lucchesi, he continues. Found out he had a wife in hospice and a daughter working herself into the ground trying to pay for both. Found out he died 6 months later. Heart attack, the doctors called it. But I knew better. You don't survive that kind of beating without something breaking permanently. So you watched me. I say it like the accusation it might be. So I watched you, he confirms. Made sure the debt collectors didn't get creative. Made sure when you applied here, you got hired. Made sure no one in my organization or anyone else's decided you were useful leverage. He finally looks at me. I owed him a debt I couldn't repay, Brenda, so I've been paying it to you instead. 6 years of protection you never knew you needed. The weight of that settles over me like the blanket on my shoulders, warm and suffocating at once. 6 years. My entire adult life, shaped by decisions someone else made, protected by walls I never saw. That's why you knew about the till, I say. The syrup, the watch. I notice everything in my building. But you? His voice drops. You I noticed because you were his daughter, and keeping you safe was the only way I could square what he did for me. I should be angry. Should feel manipulated, controlled, caged by protection I never asked for. But all I feel is exhausted and raw and strangely hollow, like something essential has been carved out of me during this endless night. Does your protection come with a cage? I ask, and my voice sounds distant even to my own ears. Because right now, that's what this feels like. 6 years of decisions made for me, doors opened and closed without my knowledge. You say I'm not cargo, but cargo is exactly what I've been. Gary flinches like I've struck him. That's not, isn't it? I turn to face him fully. You hired me, watched me, kept threats away I never knew existed, and tonight, when someone finally touched me, you didn't ask what I wanted, you just declared war. My hands are shaking, so I shove them in my pockets. I'm grateful, Gary. Terrified and grateful and so tired I can barely stand. But I need to know, does choosing you mean choosing the cage? Because I've spent 6 years being small and invisible, and I can't do it again. Not even for someone who thinks he's protecting me. The silence between us is huge, heavy with the weight of things neither of us knows how to say. The sun climbs higher, and the city below starts to move. Cars on bridges, boats on the water, people beginning their ordinary days in a world that shifted overnight. No cage, Gary says finally. His voice is rough, scraped raw. Not unless you want one, not unless you ask for it. What does that mean? He steps closer, and suddenly we're inches apart, close enough that I can see the exhaustion in his eyes, the shadow of stubble on his jaw, the way his hands are trembling slightly at his sides. It means I want you to stay. Work here, live under my protection. Let me teach you how this world works so you can choose your place in it. He pauses. But if you want to leave, go back to your apartment, your old life, disappear the way you've been doing, I'll let you. I'll keep you safe from a distance like I've been doing. No pressure, no obligations. And if I stay, I ask, what then? Then we figure out what this is. His hand lifts, hovers near my face, and this time when his fingers touch my chin, it's not commanding. It's asking. You and me. What we could be if we're both brave enough to choose it. I don't know how to be brave, I whisper. You got in a car tonight knowing it might get you killed. You spotted a detail that cracked this whole thing open. You stood in a loading bay and watched consequences happen because you wanted to own your part. His thumb brushes my jawline. You're the bravest person I've met in years, Brenda. You just don't know it yet. The space between us feels electric. Dangerous. I can feel his breath, warm against my face. Can see the way his eyes drop to my mouth, then back up. The question hanging in the air is so loud I'm surprised the whole city can't hear it. Only the ones I want, I echo his earlier words. What if I don't know what I want? Then we figure it out together. His voice has gone soft again, that dangerous soft that makes my pulse race. But Brenda? If you stay, if you choose this, people will know. They'll see you with me. And that makes you visible in ways you've spent years avoiding. It makes you a target, a liability, a person who matters in a world where mattering can get you killed. I'm already visible, I say. You made sure of that tonight. I can undo it. Send you away, create distance, make sure everyone knows you're off limits for reasons that have nothing to do with me caring. He's so close now that I can feel the warmth radiating off him. Or we stop pretending that 6 years of watching you was just about debt. We stop pretending that the minute I saw you crying, something in me broke open that I can't put back. The truth of that crashes over me like a wave. This wasn't just about my father. Maybe it started there. But somewhere in 6 years of careful distance, it became something else. Something that has Gary Downey standing on a rooftop at dawn, offering me choices instead of orders. Kiss me, I whisper. And I don't know if it's the exhaustion or the fear or the strange courage that comes from surviving a night that should have destroyed me. If we're doing this, if I'm choosing you, then kiss me and make it real. He does. It's soft at first. Careful, like he's afraid I'll break. His hand curves around the back of my neck, fingers threading through my hair, and his mouth finds mine with a certainty that steals my breath. He tastes like coffee and smoke and something darker I can't name, and when I kiss him back, it's not careful anymore. It's inevitable, certain. The kind of kiss that turns private vows into public declarations, that makes everything before it feel like prologue, and everything after feel like consequence. His other hand finds my waist, pulls me closer until there's no space left between us. My hands fist in his shirt, holding on because my legs have forgotten how to support my weight. The city spins around us, river and sky and buildings and bridges. But all of it fades to background noise against the sound of his breathing and mine, the hammer of our hearts, the moment when invisible becomes seen. When we finally break apart, I'm gasping, and he looks wrecked. Hair disheveled, lips swollen, something fierce and possessive burning in his eyes. No going back from that, he says roughly. Good. I'm still holding his shirt, still anchored to him like he's the only solid thing left. I don't want to go back. I want... The roof door bangs open. Tino steps out, and his expression shifts from professional to amused to carefully blank in the space of 2 seconds. He takes in the scene. Me wrapped, in Gary's arms, both of us breathing hard, the obvious evidence of what just happened written all over our faces. Boss, he says, and there's something like respect in his voice. Final count just came through. Gary doesn't let me go, just keeps one arm around my waist while he turns to face Tino. And? 337 confirmed departures, bus stations, train terminals, private vehicles, the works. We've got names on most of them, photos on the rest. Tino's mouth curves into something that might be a smile. Every man with cobalt inked on his hands is gone. East Side's empty. Paolo's running operations from Jersey now, and word on the street is that your protection isn't negotiable anymore. The title promise lands like an anchor dropping. Every man in the city left town. Not literally, I know that, but close enough that it feels like prophecy fulfilled. Gary nods once. Good. Send the documentation to our lawyers. I want everything filed, sealed, and stored where it can't be disappeared. Already done. Tino glances at me, then back at Gary. Congratulations, boss. On multiple fronts. He leaves, and the door clicks shut behind him, and suddenly it's just us again on the roof, with dawn fully broken and the city spread out below like a gift. So, I say, still breathless, everyone knows now. Everyone knows. Gary's thumb traces circles on my hip through my shirt. You're visible, Brenda. No going back to invisible after this. I think about my father's watch, the cracked crystal, the leather band Gary gave me. Think about 6 years of being small and careful and safe. Think about one night that turned all of that inside out. Good, I say again. I'm tired of being small. Gary kisses my forehead, soft and certain. Then let's be big together. The sun climbs higher, the city breathes, and somewhere in the space between protection and choice, I finally understand what freedom costs. Everything. And somehow, standing here with Gary Downey's arms around me and 337 people fleeing because he decided I mattered, it feels like a price worth paying. We descend from the roof into a building that feels different than it did 12 hours ago. The same marble floors, same glass walls, same expensive fixtures, but transformed by what happened in the spaces between. The loading bay where consequences were delivered. The office where protection became something more than distance. The rooftop where private became public with a single kiss. Gary's office is exactly as we left it. Laptop still open, monitors still cycling through security feeds, the crystal decanter half empty. But there's a new document on the desk, printed on heavy paper that looks official and permanent. Sit, Gary says, and this time it sounds less like an order and more like an invitation. I take the chair across from his desk, the one visitors use, the one that puts me on the other side of authority. Gary remains standing, hands in his pockets, watching me with an expression I'm learning to read. Careful, intentional. Making sure I understand this moment matters. Before anything else happens, before the arcade opens, before staff arrives, before the city finishes processing what we did last night, you need to decide. He nods toward the paper. That's the job offer. Real one this time, not the version I tore up to prove a point. I pull the document closer. The text is clean, professional, stripped of emotion. Position, Night Operations Coordinator. Salary, $48,000 annually. Benefits, health insurance, tuition stipend, up to $15,000 a year. Security detail, optional by request. Responsibilities, oversee closing procedures, manage late shift staff, coordinate vendor relations, maintain security protocols, report directly to ownership. Start date, immediate employee name. The blank line stares at me like a test I'm not sure how to pass. You don't have to sign it, Gary says quietly. You can walk out of here right now. I'll have Mariah drive you home. You'll get severance for the position you held before, 6 months' pay, enough to cover your father's debt and give you breathing room. The no-touch clause stands regardless. You're protected whether you stay or go. And if I sign? Then you're choosing this world, not just me, the whole architecture of it. Late nights, difficult decisions, proximity to things that most people spend their lives avoiding. He leans against the desk, close enough that I can see the exhaustion pulling at him. You'll be visible, Brenda. Everyone who looks at this building will know that the woman at the espresso bar isn't just staff anymore. She's someone Gary Downey cares about protecting. That comes with weight. I pick up the pen sitting next to the contract. Expensive. Heavy, the kind that makes signatures feel permanent. My hand hovers over the blank line. "What name do I use?" I ask. Gary's eyebrows lift slightly. "Your name. But which version?" I set the pen down, and my voice comes out smaller than I intend. "The invisible one? The girl who counted tills and stayed small? Or something else?" He's quiet for a moment, considering. Then he pulls the other chair around the desk and sits beside me instead of across from me. Equal height. Equal weight. "Your father kept books under his real name," Gary says. "Never hid who he was, even when hiding would have been safer. He signed Vincent Lucchesi on every ledger because he wanted people to know that when they hired him, they were hiring someone who stood behind his work." He taps the blank line. "You're his daughter. You decide what that means." I think about my father's watch, still ticking its frozen time on my wrist. Think about 6 years of debt paid in invisibility. Think about the loading bay, the rooftop, the kiss that made everything before it feel like waiting. I pick up the pen and write in careful letters, "Brenda Lucchesi, not smaller, not hidden, just my name, the one my father gave me, the one that cost him everything, and gave me the only inheritance that matters. The knowledge that some things are worth standing behind, even when standing gets you hurt." Gary takes the contract, witnesses my signature with his own, and slides it into a folder that he locks in his desk drawer. When he looks at me again, there's something in his face that might be relief or might be pride. "Welcome to the team," he says. "Now let's show the city what night operations actually means." The arcade opens at 10 a.m., 3 hours later than usual. Staff trickles in through the service entrance. Security first, then vendors, then the day shift that keeps the machines running and the espresso bar stocked. They move through the space with the careful awareness of people who know something happened, but haven't been told what. Mariah handles the briefing in the third-floor conference room, while I stand at the back, wrapped in a clean shirt Gary found in his office closet. It smells like cedar and expensive detergent, and it's 3 sizes too big. But it covers the bruises on my arms and makes me look less like someone who survived an assault, and more like someone who belongs here. "Last night we had a security incident," Mariah says, her voice carrying the weight of authority. 2 individuals attempted robbery at the espresso bar. The situation was handled internally, and those responsible have been removed from the city permanently. She pauses, letting that sink in. "As a result, we're implementing new protocols. Closing procedures now require 2 staff members present at all times. Security cameras have been upgraded, and we have a new night operations coordinator who will be overseeing all late shift activities." She gestures to me, and suddenly 20 pairs of eyes turn in my direction. Some of you know Brenda from the espresso bar. As of today, she's coordinating everything that happens after 6 p.m. Questions about closing, vendor issues, security concerns, they go through her. Mr. Downey has personally authorized her position, and I expect everyone to extend her the same respect you'd extend to any member of senior staff. The room is silent. Then Marco, the day shift manager who used to steal my cinnamon syrup, nods once. "Understood." Others follow, heads nodding, murmurs of acknowledgement, the subtle shift in body language that says the hierarchy just reorganized itself, and everyone's recalculating their position within it. Respect, I realize, not earned through years of grinding. Given because Gary Downey decided I was worth protecting, and in his world, that's the only currency that matters. After the briefing, Mariah walks me through the arcade as it comes to life. The slot machines boot up with their cheerful bells. The espresso machine hisses steam. Morning light pours through the glass walls, turning the whole space into something golden and almost innocent. "You'll get pushback," Mariah says quietly as we walk. "People who think you didn't earn this. People who wonder what you did to deserve Gary's attention. Let them wonder?" She smiles. "Good answer." "But Brenda? Watch your back anyway. Gary cleaned house last night, but houses get dirty again. There are always people looking for angles. As if summoning them by speaking, the front door opens and a man in a rumpled suit steps inside. Not staff. Not a customer. He's got a badge clipped to his belt, and the particular exhaustion that comes from working cases no one wants. Detective. He scans the arcade, and his eyes land on me with the precision of someone who knows exactly who he's looking for. He doesn't approach, just stands there, letting me know I've been seen, noted, filed away for future reference. Friend of yours? I ask Mariah. Homicide, works the waterfront. She watches him with professional interest, probably wondering why 300 people fled the city overnight and whether any of them are going to turn up in the river. Are they? Not if Gary keeps his word, and Gary always keeps his word. She steers me toward the espresso bar. But the detective doesn't know that. So he'll watch and he'll wait, and eventually he'll decide whether you're someone worth investigating. The detective lingers for another minute, then leaves. But the weight of his attention stays behind. A reminder that last night's consequences have their own consequences. At the espresso bar, there's a small stack of mail that accumulated overnight. Bills, vendor catalogs, the usual administrative debris. I sort through it mechanically until I reach the bottom. A postcard, blank on one side. On the other, a single image drawn in gold ink. A crescent moon. My stomach drops. The gold tooth. Kovich's signature. I flip it over, looking for a message, but there's nothing. Just the crescent, gleaming in the morning light, and a postmark from Newark dated yesterday, before everything happened, before the exodus, before Gary made his point. Problem? Gary appears at my shoulder, coffee in hand. I show him the postcard. His expression doesn't change, but his jaw tightens. He sent it before we picked him up, I say. A message that got delayed. Or a message from someone else. Gary pockets the postcard. I'll have Tino track it. But Brenda? This is what I meant about visibility. Every threat you receive now, I have to investigate. Every piece of mail, every phone call, every stranger who looks at you wrong, it all becomes work. I can handle work. I know you can. He sets his coffee on the counter and turns me to face him. But I need you to tell me when it gets too heavy. Need you to promise that you won't try to carry this alone the way your father did. The reference lands softly, but I feel it. My father, burning ledgers in silence. Dying with secrets that could have saved him if he'd just asked for help. I promise, I say. No silence, no martyrdom. Just honest work in a dishonest world. That's all I'm asking. The arcade continues opening around us. Staff moving through routines, customers starting to trickle in, the normal day asserting itself over the extraordinary night. But there's a difference in the air. Something lighter, emptier. Like the city took a breath and found more room than it had before. At noon, I get a text from a number I don't recognize. Dentist on Delancey closed shop. Left town this morning. Feds are asking questions. No signature, but I know it's from Tino's network. The eyes Gary keeps on everything that matters. Another thread pulling loose. Another consequence spreading outward like ripples. Hey. Gary touches my arm, pulling me back from wherever my thoughts were spiraling. Come here. He leads me to the third-floor window. The one that overlooks the river. The bridges. The city spreading out in all directions. We stand there side by side, his shoulder touching mine, and I feel the weight of the last 12 hours settling into something I can almost carry. 337 people, I say quietly. Gone because you asked who made me cry. Gone because they made a mistake, Gary corrects. I just made sure the lesson stuck. Below, the city moves through its rhythms. Cars crossing bridges. Boats on the water. People living their small, invisible lives without knowing how close they came to being caught in someone else's war. My father's watch ticks against my wrist, still broken, still frozen at 11:52. but somehow more honest than any working clock could be. A reminder that time doesn't heal everything, but it does move forward whether you're ready or not. What happens next? I ask. Gary's hand finds mine, fingers threading together. We run the business. We watch for threats. We build something that feels less like survival and more like living. He pauses. And when Paolo or the Cobalt crew or whoever comes next decides to test whether my word still holds, we show them why you don't make my people cry. The sun climbs higher. The arcade hums below us. And somewhere in the space between protection and partnership, I understand that I'm not my father's daughter anymore. Not just his debt, his ghost, his unfinished business. I'm Brenda Lucchesi, Night Operations Coordinator, the woman who noticed a gold tooth and changed the shape of a city. I'm visible now. Chosen. Protected not from a distance, but from right here, standing at a window with a man who emptied the streets because someone broke my watch. The city feels different, I say. The city is different. Gary squeezes my hand. But you already knew that. You've been different since the minute you walked through my doors 11 months ago. I just finally caught up. My father's watch ticks its frozen time. The leather band Gary gave me smells like cedar and promises. And when I look at our reflection in the window, two figures backlit by arcade lights, hands joined, facing the city together, I see what I've been too small to notice for 6 years. I see someone worth protecting. Someone worth choosing. Someone who makes other people feel safe just by refusing to disappear. The city is lighter now. Emptier. Full of room to breathe. And for the first time since my father died, I take a full breath and hold it.